Please be advised that this recorded webinar has been edited from its original format, which may have included a product demo. To set up a live demo or to request more information, please complete the form to the right. Or if you are currently not on CSC Global, there is a link to the website in the description of this video. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Simplify Your Insurance License Process. My name is Tariq Hopkins, and I'll be your moderator. Joining us today are Brian Bartnicki and Kayla Heathman. Brian is the Senior Business License Sales Engineer at the forefront, assisting customers with their industry-specific requirements, which range from research, portfolio, and renewal services. Brian has worked with CSC for more than a decade, offering his expertise in the field of license compliance. Kayla is a sales engineer that supports the Corporate Legal Services Group at CSC and is based in Wilmington, Delaware. Since joining CSC in 2015, Kayla has focused on B2B relationship management and consulting to find solutions that best fit the needs of new clients. And with that, let's welcome Brian and Kayla.
Great. Thank you, Tariq. Good morning, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Before we dive into the presentation, we'll review a quick agenda for today's webinar. First, we'll start with some background on CSC. Then we'll speak through some common compliance standards that you face when doing business. Outside of those common standards, we'll dive into some of those insurance-specific licenses and requirements that would apply to you today. Along with those different license types and requirements, we'll identify some of the common challenges that we typically hear about throughout that license process. We'll work through some of the repercussions of non-compliance, and then we'll review CSC's 5 easy steps to streamline your license process, and then also a quick demonstration of the technology that really ties everything together. And lastly, we'll open up the session for Q&A at the end. So first, a little bit about CSC and the brief background or refresher for you, rather. CSC is headquartered in Wilmington, Delaware, with office locations around the globe. Today, we serve more than 180,000 corporate customers, which also does include 90% of the Fortune 500. We support more than 10,000 law firms and provide solutions to over 3,000 financial market customers. We even protect more than 65% of the 100 best global brands around. So first, talking about some of those compliance standards that you might be facing. When we think about being licensed to do business, there are a few different requirements that might come to mind. So let's review some of those and some of the most common compliance standards that you might be facing within the insurance industry today, and where CSC can offer some of those supports. So first and foremost are the Secretary of State registrations that include just incorporating the business or the agency and then registering as a foreign entity in states outside of your home state or your residence state. While these initial registrations are really only one-time filings, they do come with different requirements, which you can see as your Secretary of State annual reports. And those really are in the works, and they're filings that allow you to stay in compliance and stay in good standing in the states where you're registered. And some of those filings are similar to the insurance filings, where they come due every year, possibly every other year, and in some cases every 10 years. But really, why we're here is to focus on those industry-specific requirements, which are probably the most important in the insurance world today. Those are all of the licenses you hold or the requirements you meet and track year over year to be able to sell insurance products, process claims, or act as a TPA, and much more there. So with that, I'll pass it to Brian to dive into some of those specific licenses.
Thanks, Kayla. So I think it's important that we kind of go over some of the license types that many of you on the line could be dealing with on a daily basis. So we'll go over that, and then we'll dive into kind of the next phase of the presentation. For those of you on the line, you might be a small company or a small agency. You might have your own business. You could be quite large and have a big network of multiple people that have different types of licenses in this space. So some of the ones that we want to go over are listed on the screen. I'll start kind of with the agency, resident and non-resident licenses. You as an organization are probably have your resident state, kind of your physical or home state. Again, very similar to a state of incorporation, but this is going to be more your resident state of where you're selling insurance. You also might have different lines of authority in that particular state. Those of you that individually could be selling, you might have life and health lines. You could have property and casualty lines. And there could be certain states that maybe you're only doing regional sales, but other people in your network, right, have other licenses in other places. So whether you have, most of you may have a producer license at an agency and or an individual level. And within the agency, you probably have a designated responsible party or producer who's really listed as that individual of responsibility as well. The other types could be surplus lines. Maybe the risk is just too high for a particular policy that somebody wants. These are licenses that allow you to obtain a policy from a company or from a provider outside of that particular state. Again, that's based on kind of the risk or the amount, that the policy is needed for. Some of you may have adjuster licenses. There could be public adjusters potentially, but adjuster licenses are really a way for you to kind of investigate, kind of the claim itself or the coverage, the extent of coverage that the claim has. What is that potentially? We always run into adjusters, with home damage, things of that nature. Maybe a tree falls on your house. You might run into third-party administrators. That's going to be an actual party that's physically processing claims. They might have other types of administrative services, potentially risk management or kind of consulting in that space. That's going to be a specialty type of license. There's a lot of unique information that you have to provide financial data when you renew those. So there's just different, that's another type of specialty license. And then you have MGA, which stands for a managing general agent. That's a specialized broker. For those of you that have those, it's kind of just another type of license that allows you to perform functions that are usually handled by insurers in some situations. So it's just more of a complex specialty license. And then you have appointments. For those of you that are selling insurance, you might have might be appointed, I should say, to provide options to your customers based on different numbers of carriers. You could maybe sell policies for one carrier in one state, but then you want to get appointed to sell for multiple carriers in that state as well. Could have 3, 4, 5, whatever that would be, again, based on what you're selling. So these are just some examples of the licenses that we come across when we talk to customers. So I think it's important now that we've kind of talked about the types of licenses that are out there. Now we'll kind of dive into some of the challenges that we hear in the industry when we talk to individuals who handle these responsibilities on a daily basis. The first one that comes to mind is just going to be manually tracking dates. You might have situations where you're plugging it in Outlook, or you might even have an Excel spreadsheet for that matter, but you have so many responsibilities that you're physically, changing the spreadsheet. Then a month later, you have more filings, so you're constantly updating it, and it's not the most, clean process. It's disjointed, but it's normal. It's probably the most common thing that we run into, where people kind of manually tracking dates as to when they're due. And really the challenge with that in the insurance world is licenses are going to be due based in certain states based on multiple variables. They could be potentially based on the birthday of the individual. And I don't know everyone's birthday off the top of my head, so I couldn't even tell you actually when Kayla's birthday is. No, I'm just kidding. But there's different situations. It could be based on anniversary month. It could be based on the anniversary month, that is the date that you've registered in that particular state, the month, that is. Or it could be TPA licenses are going to be due in March for every particular state. So trying to manually understand when these are coming due is just a massive challenge, especially when you scale as you grow, or if you're a large organization, or you just don't have the sheer time, which is one of the items here is the sheer time allocation. But really, what happens with this is you get into a reactionary model. You're constantly playing catch-up. It's hard to be proactive. You might get to the situation where you're in the last minute, you get a notice that you have a license coming due, but you realize, oh my gosh, I can't apply for the license because I haven't fulfilled my continuing education requirement, because you're always kind of behind the scenes reacting just because it's really difficult to get a handle on everything. And that really all stems back to the idea that there's no transparency in this. You might not have the ability to view all the license data in a nice, simple way. You might only handle a portion of it. There could be other people across the country that might handle part of the portfolio, and you might handle just a specific region of the portfolio. So those are some other common things that we run into where it's very kind of segregated, based on maybe types of licenses, based on the physical layout of organizations. Kind of bringing everything together is something that's just a very kind of daunting challenge as well in many cases. And just there's a lot of internal administrative costs that come with this too. Believe it or not, there's some licenses you can't file online. You can't file it with the National Insurance Producer Registry. You might have to file directly with the Department of Insurance. Or you might have to, you're using your credit card, you're cutting checks. You're really spending a bunch of your time, printing labels for tracking for couriers. There's just a lot behind the scenes, really along with, scheduling or telling people they need to complete continuing education. There's really a lot of, I'll call it, homework assignments that you find yourself doing, through the process as well. And then ultimately another item that comes up, which Kayla is going to dive into these in more detail later on in the presentation, is simply that of reporting administrative actions. There could be situations where you have people in the field that have an administrative action, and they don't let you know about it. And now you kind of have to report that accordingly. Or something happens just by fluke, but you have to report the action. And going through the process and notifying all these states about those actions is time-consuming. It's kind of a pain, but it is something that absolutely has to be done. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Kayla to kind of talk to the ramifications of noncompliance.
Great. Thanks, Brian, and thanks for walking us through some of those challenges. As you just mentioned, there are some of those challenges that really can turn into ramifications or consequences of noncompliance, or just a licensing process in place that's maybe not running as smoothly as you'd hope. So really the first type of penalty or consequence that we really see in this space is, as you just mentioned, really those failures to report those administrative actions. Without these great processes in place, you might have individuals going ahead and filing their own licenses, and maybe they don't want to report an action or don't want to take those appropriate steps. Well, that can really come back and hurt you in the long run. You could have those fines and penalties that come from failure to report those administrative actions or report them appropriately and file the right paperwork, as Brian mentioned. So those are really some of the things from an administrative action standpoint that we truly see a lot would be the fines and different penalties for just not reporting that appropriately. It can lead to a longer process to even file if you have to go back and refile with more fees and even possibly sometimes a little bit more harsh than that and moving towards some additional legal actions or anything that can come from that. Really, the next thing that we see from a ramification standpoint are the loss of licenses or even the potential to lose your license at cease and desist or not being able to do business within certain states again. This can happen from a couple of different standpoints. If you've been operating without a license and just doing business in those states without ever getting a license and then failing to do that or being caught in the act, if you will. Any Department of Insurance can opt to not approve your license from that point forward, or if you have been operating under a lapsed license because there was that type of failure to file that renewal, there are certain states that will have those types of ramifications to either not renew your license or go through the process to ask you to stop producing or doing business within their states because of the failure to comply. Now, Brian had alluded to this a little bit earlier, where there are some things with non-resident licenses, resident states, and then even at our last point here, agency and individual licenses that really go together hand in hand. So the impact of possibly not staying up with resident state requirements or completing that CE or continuing education, as Brian mentioned, can truly impact the licenses that you hold across other states or your non-resident states, and it's really truly a trickle-down effect. So if you aren't staying up into compliance with the resident state requirements, that could possibly have a negative impact on any of the other states where you're licensed because you're not complying with the right regulations. Also from that designated responsible producer impact from if your license lapses in that respect from an individual perspective, or even that your designated responsible producer leaves the organization and is no longer a part of that, that can have negative impacts on the agency license, which can lead to some of those other things there like the fines or loss or potential cease and desist of any of those operations in those states. So really just some of those ramifications that we would really see on a day-to-day basis as we go through the process to assist customers. Now, understanding all of that and the challenges in the license world and possible consequences that you might face, we're really just going to switch gears a little bit and work through how CSE can help improve your licensing process and really maintain the compliance and get you set up for that really streamlined and effective process in place to help avoid any of those challenges or potential ramifications. So how can we help? How can CSE help? We do have a full outsourcing solution for your insurance licenses where we actually become an extension of your team to maintain the renewals, the data as it relates to your licenses, and different things that Brian mentioned you possibly are storing on Excel spreadsheets or in internal folders. Really what our solution will help do is minimize the risk to the organization and the individuals with the potential of missing expirations. Working with CSE allows you to be proactive about those and minimize the risk of really going out of compliance. We help decrease your administrative burdens, as Brian mentioned, all of those different things like finding applications, understanding where to go or completing them, following up for different items or other ancillary filings. You wouldn't have to do that any longer with CSE Solution. When we step in, we go ahead and file those applications and find all of that information for you. We're eliminating that complexity as our next note because, again, we are going to compile those applications. We're going to find everything for you. We're going to help you understand what needs to be on those applications so it's very easy for you to move forward in the filing process. We're also going to implement that transparency that you might not have today. As Brian mentioned, there could possibly be multiple people who file these licenses or handle those. And in working with CSE, we're able to provide you with one area where you do that by providing real-time status updates, the copies of the licenses, and really get that clear view into the portfolio as to who holds licenses, where they are, the lines of authority that are associated with them, and possibly things that you don't track today. As Brian mentioned, we have some of those costs or challenges with costs, so what we're able to do is help reduce those costs, whether it's from a time savings perspective, because we are working on the licenses for you, working through those complexities and finding where to file, or even financially, if today you work with a third party or have some folks internally doing that for you. And then really lastly, the best part about this and really the huge driving factor is that centralization where we have a tool, our license portfolio management tool that's going to give you a fully centralized and accessible database of all of that license information, all of the things that pertain to those licenses that are important to you, core data points, the applications we file, any of the copies of the licenses, and really giving you a great view into your license portfolio here. Wonderful. So really, as we understand how CSC can step in and help out with this process, we also want to walk you through really our steps to be able to streamline this process for you, whether it is from a filing perspective or really just an onboarding perspective. We want to give you those tips and tools to be able to streamline your license process and a couple of easy steps for you. So our first step is really that we're going to build a license portfolio for you based on your license information. And to make it very simple and streamlined, all we do is ask for the NPN numbers that are associated with your individuals and your agency, and we use that information to go ahead and obtain the license data and the information to build into your license portfolio. So you really don't have to do much other than provide those numbers for us, and then we do the rest. So when you are logging in for the first time to your CSC portfolio, you're to view all of the license information we just spoke about, who the licenses apply to, what types they are, where they are, and different things like that, expiration dates, license numbers, all of that core data that you need just by providing the NPN numbers to CSC. This is really step one, give you that central view of your license information within the CSC system. Step two is that we are going to proactively monitor all of the upcoming expiration dates and upcoming licenses up for renewal. So the process changes where all of your licenses go on an automatic schedule where we're going to go ahead and pull all of those applications for you and start the process proactively, probably about 60 days prior to the expiration to ensure that we can get those filed on your behalf and there's no issues there. Now, step three really comes from, aside from proactively monitoring the expirations, we're going to then go ahead and prepare and file the renewals on your behalf, right? With that proactive monitoring and understanding when they're expiring well in advance, we're able to prepare those licenses and reach out to you if there's anything we need to clarify and file prior to their expiration, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And really from there, the step four is to confirm the completion. So understanding, has the license been accepted? What does that look like? Can we download your license copies? Are we able to do that? And then from there, we take all of that information that we have and we update your portfolio to reflect that new information. Along the way, we are also going to provide some updates and status information that Brian will walk you through in just a little while. That way you can kind of see all of this happening in clear view from that transparency perspective. And then really the last thing for us to do is, aside from having those updates in your portfolio, is archiving the historical information. So working with CSC means that you do get that full visibility and transparency into what exists for you today and what we're working on, but it also extends a little bit further by having us maintain that historical view and never purging information that we've had within our portfolio for you. So we're just going to take any old license information that we've now renewed and move it to a filing history for you to view, and that way you have that for your records moving forward. And all of that, again, is handled by CSC, so it is something that you'll be able to view in your portfolio, and then those 5 steps will be followed year over year or every other year, as Brian mentioned earlier, and you can sit back and trust CSC with your license portfolio. And now with that, Brian, do you want to walk us through some of the benefits of our technology?
Sure. So I think it's important, before I kind of jump into the visual side of the presentation, just to highlight some quick housekeeping items pertaining to the technology that comes with the actual filing outsourcing service. It is web-based, so as long as you have internet connection, you can log in anywhere in the world. It is also SOC 2 compliant, so from a security perspective, just know it's world-class security and technology. And it's really going to solve kind of one of those initial challenges that I talked to on the onset, which is that of transparency. It's really going to kind of centralize all the information in one place, which ultimately is going to help kind of prevent any penalties or just kind of the items that can occur if you were to miss a particular license. And it is going to be real-time updating of the filing statuses. So beyond just having the license data in one place, you will, as a customer, which I'll show you, be able to see whether a license was submitted, what day it was submitted, or if there's anything pending on your end, maybe we reach out to you for certain items kind of when we ask for that information. So it really provides a lot of accountability on both sides of the fence. Beyond that, it's, web-based. It's easy implementation. As Kayla mentioned, we just need the national producer number. That's kind of the social security number, so to speak, right? It's kind of equivalent of what we would call, the identifier for the agency or particular individuals. You probably have a national producer number, right? That NPN number. And no matter how big you are, how small you are as an organization, this technology is really suited for all companies and all sizes. And you can have as many users actually that you would like. It's unlimited users. There's no cost for users as part of the service as well. We're really making it simple. We're giving you the ability to view, all the license data in one place, and training and support, are included. Even though it's, an online technology, there's no situation where, you have to, pay for training. You don't have to pay for support. You don't have to download anything. It's purely in the cloud, and that's part of the service. All the training and support are free if you ever need to take advantage of that.
Thank you to everyone who joined us. We hope that we get to see you next time. Thank you, Brian and Kayla, for a great presentation. And we hope everyone has a great rest of their day.